for those of you who are new to our group, Handbag Designer 101 has been around since 2006. We launched the Independent Handbag Designer Award shortly after, which is super exciting because we're now in our 7th year. Actually, our first Iconoclast recipient is here with us today, Carlos, who has become our fairy godfather to just about everything we do.
Thank you.
Our Iconoclast recipient this year is Rafé, which is really exciting for us to have him here as well. Monica, you're on deck, so don't worry. But since we launched the awards, we've had a really, really exciting growth. Our database of handbag designers at this point is almost 3,000 internationally. We get over 1,000 applicants worldwide for the awards. The winning designers are featured in the September issue of InStyle. We are partnered with Brother. We're partnered with Timberland. The winner of the best handbag and overall style and design gets their line picked up in Bloomingdale's. And more excitingly, they do a collaboration with Rafé, which is really exciting for an independent designer. So without further ado, let's just get started. So this is an open dialogue. Everybody's just feel free to jump in, and we're gonna last for about an hour or so, and then we'll have about a half hour for Q&A. And I know this is super exciting to be so close to the Masters, so hold your questions to the end, and we'll absolutely have time to get to all of them. So let's just start from the beginning. And I've got my James Lipton cards here. So this is inside the Handbag Designer Studio for a reason. So were you always fascinated by handbags? So
who wants to answer first?
Go ahead.
Ladies first, I guess. Not really, actually. Not as a child. I was really into clothes. I was always sketching clothes. But as I got a bit older, somehow I just got, I guess, bag obsessed.
Carlos?
Well, literally at age 5, 6, I made a macrame handbag.
You knew how to macrame at 5?
It's one of those things. I was born in Brazil, so you did all this arts and crafts as very young, and I, very business little devil. I went and sold my bag to my aunt.
Wow.
Which then I had orders. I was 6 years old, not knowing that I was going to be in the handbag business.
Rafé?
No, actually not. I was really interested in fashion at a very young age, and handbags just sort of happened, organically over the years when I moved to New York. But it was really fashion.
So, did you design as kids? Do you know how to sew?
Yes, actually. I used to design my own. Growing up in the Philippines, you had to wear your Sunday's best on Sundays. And when I was growing up, I did not wear any Sunday's best. I would just wear
That did not go over well, did it?
Not with my sisters, because they were like, you look like a gardener's son. So they forced me to have, clothes made. And then at that point, when I went to the tailor, I remember kind of thinking, well, I don't like the way that looks. Why don't I change it? So I started sketching my own things. And then when it was like, oh my God, wait, I can sketch and it shows up on my body, like, wait, oh, fashion, hi, thank you. So then every weekend I was like having clothes made for my Sunday's best.
So you were actually designing your own Sunday's best?
Yes.
Did you still look like the gardener's son?
Did I? I hope not.
So how old were you when you learned to sew?
Actually, I learned to sew I took a sewing class in the Philippines because I just really wanted to learn how to do things. And then I realized that it was tedious, beyond. And then I went to FIT and took more sewing classes. And I think at the end of that, realized, okay, this is good that I know it, but I'm not doing it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not doing buttonholes by hand. No way. But I'm glad that I can do it. It's a good thing to know.
It is. Definitely. I mean, they always say you should never open up a clothing store if you don't know how to shop. So it's so important that you know actually how the product is made so you can reverse engineer it so you have a better understanding.
Yes.
So if a bag lacks structure and can't stand up on its own, you actually know how to take it apart and say, I think this gusset might need more structure or more interfacing. So Monica, could you sew? What was your story?
Not really. I was a kind of the class artist, so I was always drawing and painting, and then eventually really became a photographer, and that was actually how I got into doing this, because I pursued fashion photography. So it was kind of parallel, but I was always about the visual and somehow was able to just kind of translate and sketch what I wanted, but I never was bold enough to try and actually make it. I mean, as a kid, yeah, we'd put like, you know, we'd cut out something and hand sew it, but it was not, you know, I wouldn't call that fashion.
Yeah.
It was just arts and crafts.
Waiting.
I had no choice. My mom was a she designed wedding dresses, and she put, that was her business, and I like it or not, and that way she kept track of her kids. We sat there and stitched pearls into, and I was very little, and so that's that I had to do it. And also, I was very rebellious later on. I took things apart. I was constantly taking things apart. So I made all my own clothes. So by reversing it, because it's like I didn't like what I saw it, so I had to change it and keep changing it. And it, when I arrived in America, it created a whole career for me by completely undoing things. And that's what I did.
Didn't Jackie O just show up at your office by accident?
She sure did. I basically, because I arrived here and I also work in restaurants and all that, and at that time, to whatever job I could get, I did. But I still made I would take jeans and I would take them apart and I would put pieces and collages, and I would piece everything up, and people would go, "Where did you get that?" So I make it, and my career started in Max's Kansas City. So I was selling all what I wore, because everybody said, "Oh, where did you get?" So, I make it. All right.
That's always the way that you get, and it's funny because of the handbag designers that we deal with, or that I deal with, because I deal with so many, that I always say, just because you've sold one bag doesn't mean you have a business. Which is, and it's kind of a harsh reality that, you know, if you get enough validation from your close inner circle, once you get out in the big bad mean world, a buyer is not going to validate your product just because, you know, they might like you a little bit. Everything comes down to, will the product sell? So just let's go back to this family thing. Was anyone else in your family? I know you've got some babushka going on for you.
My Russian grandfather. But the crazy thing is that I didn't know that. Nobody said anything in my family. And a couple years into my business, my dad walked into my office one day and he was like, "Oh, did I ever tell you that my father had a handbag factory in Russia?" And I was like, "What?"
Really?
Like, how did you not tell me that? And he kind of threw this bag on my table that he had made for my grandmother. And then it just got very sort of sentimental for me. I started to say, wow, you know, it's in the blood and whatever. So I guess yes, there was someone in my family.
Was anybody with you?
In fashion, actually, both of my sisters used to model in the Philippines. And,
Did Tessa?
Yeah.
That's
back in the day,
Tessa.
sorry. So they would take me on the, back in the day, they rehearsed everything. So they rehearsed runway, choreography.
Were you the youngest?
Yes, I'm the youngest.
Oh,
yes.
that's why.
So they just took me along to their shows and their rehearsals, and I would be like this little kid that they had to feed, essentially. But it was amazing to kind of just watch all this, the process of the fashion shows and backstage, and how these college girls would be transformed to divas. It was fascinating. I was second year high school, so 10th grade. So to me, it was like, oh my God, wow, I love this, because everybody becomes something else, somebody else. Fashion transforms you.
So that definitely had an impact on you.
Absolutely, yeah. And to this day, I prefer looking at photographs of backstage as opposed to the runway shows. I think they're just more telling, they're more intimate, and they're more, spontaneous.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I never even thought of that. Did you see Isaac Mizrahi movie Unzipped?
With
the scrum, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was his whole big thing.
Yeah, that was great.
That was my favorite part of the Isaac Mizrahi era.
Yes. That was a great show.
It was.
That was a
I
great
strongly
show.
recommend it. I always used to show it to my students, Unzipped. it was a telling time. I think it came out in 96, 95, before, at the height of his business, when it's just, all of this fascinates me because I feel like it was a foreshadowing of, even if you looked at like what the Rachel Zoe project or something, and on the most recent episode, which I have to cite, that she's been dressing celebrities for years and years, but she didn't have an idea of what would sell. And I thought that was so fascinating, that it's not a transitive property, that you wouldn't know just because of what's going on upstage is not what's going to sell in stores, which is a huge, huge thing that I think a lot of people have to cut their teeth on when they're becoming a designer. And wouldn't you agree that that has a huge impact, that, you know, you get really fascinated and excited and saying, oh my gosh, wouldn't this be exciting? I want to be a designer, I want to make a change. Then you realize, oh my God, they have to sell.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I always say sometimes it's like, I can love it all I want, but if it sits on that shelf and it goes on markdown, it was not that cute.
Yeah, right.
Right.
How often do you go and check out your bags in the stores? Do you go, or do you have merchandisers? How does that, we're going to jump around, but how does that work?
It depends. I think locally I do go, but I don't really, I'm not the one to make suggestions. I get someone from my team to go and make suggestions, because I'm shy about it. I like to go and check it out and basically write down everything I don't like, and then get somebody else to go and discuss it with the buyer and figure out. In some stores you actually have to go and get them to pull the stock out of the bag, because they don't put it out.
Right.
I don't know if I should name names.
Yeah,
No, I
know.
Yes, you can name names. I think one of the things that I visit the stores, if I or go through a magazine and everything, for absolutely the opposite. Because if it is at the store, if it is already in the magazine, why am I going to do it? You don't need it. It's being done now already.
Right.
So my philosophy always been, if it's done already, I need to come up with something that was not done. I need to come up with a new thing. I need to come up with an answer to what's there. Because otherwise it just becomes another one that's already there. So when I absolutely go to the leather fair or everything else, I always do, because I've always done is actually being the rebel, like completely burning and washing and acid burning, whatever I do with my leathers, it's because I did not want what being sold in over there. And the same thing is with what's being made. And I got into the handbag completely by accident, because I really was making clothing, and I was making stuff for rock and roll in the stage, and nothing to do with, and until I got to Bendo's. This is 1870, by the way. It goes back to that time. It was like 1969, 1970. And at that time, there was no such a thing as a handbag designer. And I was bringing my wares to show to Jerry Stutz. And she looked at the vests, she looked at the skirts and stuff, but she saw this bag on the floor, which is a no bag. I didn't know how to make a handbag. I had no idea. So I just sold these big things, and I slapped things on it, and I painted, and she loved it. It was really the time where all the Japanese were doing the unconstructed, they were absolutely doing things inside out. So it was a good time. And bags in those days were Gucci, very constructed, there was navy, it was wine, and it was, those things. And I used to bleach all my colors and just create those stuff. So I stayed on that vein until this date. It's like completely, so for me, is the reverse of, so I do go to the stores to make sure that if it is in the stores, not so tough. It's already in the stores. Let's do something that's not in the store.
Well, that takes me to another question of mine, that, the anchor piece. And I'd like to say that everybody has an anchor piece. Yes. Balenciaga has its motorcycle bag that, they could redo in any shape, color, size, but it still has that same look and feel. So how do you address that if you don't want to, if it is one of your best sellers, do you appease your customer, or do you make major changes to say, okay, it's time for you to change? What do you, and you had a certain situation with your anchor piece too, that it was put at risk, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, you mean the Kardashian knockoff?
Yeah.
But, yeah, but that was a little bit after, so it didn't affect things. But I was actually really proud of, I guess, I'm not sure how it came to my attention, but through social media, people were saying, oh, the Kardashians knocked off the Botkier trigger bag. It was actually Clyde, which was a spin-off of that bag, which brings you back to your original question. So I'll answer that part first. I think that it's hard because you do want to move forward, so we usually graduate things into what I would consider a classics program. So you have those, you can bring them back on demand, you can make modifications, and then you can always go back to that as sort of your library for your brand language. So it's both. Keep it in, take it out, depends who the customer is. But for me, some of those pieces, I would say, like we probably have like 4 or 5 bags like that. They're always there, and people will ask for them.
And then if you see it on the street, you know it's a Botkier bag. You see the zippers and the pockets in a certain way that you just know.
And yeah, I see they've lived a long time, some of those. I want to go up to those women and be like, can you buy a new bag now?
I know. Every now and then you'll see somebody
great,
from like 10 years ago, like, oh, honey, you're not moving me forward. I'm glad you love it, but there's other new ones to love.
Well, how do you handle this? What do you consider your key anchor piece? Your signature wrap?
Well, it's changed over the years, I would say. I think now, I would say it's probably one of my minaudiers that are, inlaid by hand with mother of pearl. I think those are probably the anchor to my collection right now because they're special, completely done by hand, and it's something that they're not easy to manufacture. So I think by
Where
virtue,
are they made?
Made in the Philippines. So I think by virtue of that, by seeing that when people see this and they're like, oh my God, wait, how is this made? I think that already like sparks an emotion. And as a result of that, I'm able to do other things with the elements of that particular minaudier. But that's my anchor piece, and we've been able to just keep running it for the past 3 years now in different colors, but the best seller is the first one.
Well, how long have you been with Jones?
3 years.
So you didn't do it prior to Jones?
I did actually, but in a really, really small way. But I think with, with the help of a big corporation, they're able to really put it out there, market it, do the PR that's needed,
right.
To spread the word.
Because if you were to do that on your own, it probably wouldn't be cost effective.
I couldn't do. I did it on my own, except that it just requires too much. I mean, there's so much involved now, I think, in the business of fashion to be able to really, go out there. It's daunting. It's a daunting task.
I definitely agree.
Carlos, you have your totes.
Well, the thing is, for me, you find your DNA. And you find that DNA that's yours. That's all, you're secure with it. And you just trust what you do with it. And yes, I could be a collector of pieces that have been knocked off from my bags from years and years and years. And I used to hear, oh, this is the greatest flattering. Oh, this is flattering. That's fantastic. Ain't no flattering. It's you. They are making money on your designs, and that's the bottom line. But you keep your DNA. You keep that part that's very strong to you. And lucky enough, I have been doing this for a few years. I did start. I was 6, so therefore, that I know when people say, "Oh, that's a Falchi bag." I don't put hardware. I don't put names all over the place. I don't do none of that stuff. It is the bag, it is the print or the skins or whatever I use or color that identify our bags. And that's, I think, like Rafé said, sometimes we have things that go, oh God, it didn't sell at all. But I believe in it. And it's very, very important. So oddly enough, sometimes you listen to the stores and that's when you have a failure. So you have to really stay strong and just believe what you do. And find your DNA. Find your DNA and stick to it, because that's what's gonna, in the end of the day, they're all gonna come back to you and say, oh, I know that bag. Oh, I know where it came from.
Well, how do you handle that if, during market week, if a buyer comes in and says, we want this in purple, purple's the hot trend, purple's everywhere, purple, 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 and you know from your past that, you know, purple might be the piece that they might put in the window, but it's certainly not the piece that you take home. How do you balance what buyers say versus what you manufacture, what you go into production? Who at the end of the day knows best, and how do you handle that?
I think you have to take it with a grain of salt with everything. I mean, I've listened to buyers who have been, you know, who've given me great ideas, and it's like, oh, okay, I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's a really great idea. Yes, absolutely. And sometimes you're like, doesn't make sense to me. And you're like, okay, let me think about it, and then we don't do it. I mean, I think at the end it's really up to you, and sometimes you know, they walk away and you forget what they said anyway. You know, they're caught up in the moment, and then when you actually come back with something that they said they wanted, they're like, that's not what I wanted. So, you know, listen, we all have ADD, so I think at the end of the day you just have to listen to yourselves, you know. I've been doing this long enough that I just really listen to myself and trust my instinct, and you know, at least my team tells me I'm consistent. I always like the same things. And even if I've forgotten something, I'll look at something again and be like, what do we do about that? You're like, oh my God, you already said that 2 days ago. So I'm like a broken record with certain things.
Same. I would say too, you know, I've gone down that road where I've taken particular suggestions, and that's the stuff that always does not sell. So now I do exactly that. Oh, okay, we'll think about it, you know, and, or we'll do it in a small way,
Right.
and you know, then kind of usually you just unwind it and put in there what you want to.
Yes.
By this point, I feel comfortable doing that.
Well, what if, you know, all of you have been in this long enough and there's been enough evolution within this business? How have you handled it if, you know, a store walks away from you then? What do you do? How many changes do you do? And because it's a tough business, and you know, we you know, at least from the designer perspective, always refer to this as the Minkoff effect because of the way the
I know that's your.
I know,
point,
but
I knew what you were referring to.
But it's really
of?
the fact that when she started, that you know, that I guess she was agile enough to work her products to make sure that if anyone, and this is her quote, that if any bag begins with the number 5, it will get marked down. So then she made sure the majority of her product would come in below $500. And that was really, I mean, on top of her avid success with the rise of social media and being the face of her brand and everything, the price, it definitely allowed more people to purchase her product. And I think it's challenging wherever you are in this business, no matter if you've been in it for 5, 10, or 15 years, to manage this dance on price. And you know, some people perceive $250 to $395 as the sweet spot of retail now, and other stores say, okay, if you're selling something above $650, then you know, you got to make sure you have at least a collection effect. So a contemporary bag now is perceived affordable luxury just by default with price. So how do you handle this evolution? Because right now I'd say the market's just really challenging.
Well, I think we've always had to, I mean, in my collection, we've always had to have the range of like, you know, I think that effect is actually just common sense. I think we've all sat down at pricing meetings where we're like, all right, $499, $495 sounds so much better than $500. $195 is so much better than $200. Because at the end of the day, it's just that visual, like, oh, it's 1.9 something, even in the end. By the time they're done with tax, it's $225 anyway. You know? But it's just that sort of, you know, the psyche that you look at something, oh, it's $195, I can do that. You know, so I think we've had to be very flexible at giving the range. I mean, we span from like $95 all the way to $495.
I think it is one of those things that it's like a cycle, and I think it's in line with where the economy went. And so therefore, that whole mental sort of idea of what the customer wanted to pay. When I first started, you know, I love to look back at old line sheets because let me tell you, a small little bag was $445, and I could go up to $895.
Middle range.
Yeah, that was the sweet spot.
Yeah.
So I think with Minkoff, I think they caught onto it early and consciously went ahead of it.
Right.
But that's where the economy was going anyway. And you know, it's difficult. It was difficult for them and difficult for a lot of us while raw materials go up, fuel costs go up, everything else goes up. That inflation of actually creating the bag, of course, your margins are going to take a hit. You just have to get, you have to engineer, you have to value engineer your product much more now than I can tell you I ever did, you know, especially in the first 5 years of business.
Yeah, I have to say,
Also depends where you're manufacturing. 5 years ago, when you did something in China, it was one price. Today, China doesn't need us.
right.
They really don't. So therefore, their pricing is what they tell you, and that's it. In the old days, you told them what you want to pay, and you got it. Now it's the reverse. So the price structure, everything has changed. And also, the big guys, when you think here, you sit there and you understand what we call the big guys out there that control these factories, they control that, then a lot of their goods are TJ Maxx.
Yep.
That's where the biggest business is. And so that you can't go in to buy that price that they have in the store because it's not what they're selling for. They're really selling for is right here. So it's really the absolute big business. Everything they talk about is $500, $600. It's $195. It's all marked down. It's all like over there. So that's the difficulty part that you have to see.
Is that what led you to going on HSN? Or
Well, no, I've been on there many years ago, so it didn't happen yesterday. So I've been on QVC 20 years ago, so it was a progression of that. But in today's market, I mean, Michael Kors is it. Everything everybody talk about handbags, it's Michael Kors.
And Tory Burch.
It is. Finally, an American designer house discovered, we can make money in accessories. Because before that, none of the American houses understood the Europeans, all they understood, it was accessories. The biggest success companies in Europe, all the big ones, you will go, okay, who is the biggest numbers in? It's Louis Vuitton, what? Accessory. Gucci, accessory. And Prada, accessory. Chanel, really, is accessory. So American designers, for Ralph Lauren not to have the biggest number in accessories is crazy. The man has a $6 billion business and a $2 handbag business. So it's none of them. Michael Kors understood that. They got that, and their business is the one that has that kind of business. Coach is a separate issue completely, but idea of what the pricing for us that are independent to sit and price, we have that little game at the end of the day. We go, okay, we throw it in the air, because the number here doesn't make sense, but we got to fit within that price area. Right. So, and also we make small amounts. We don't make huge quantities. So that's a different issue here. So
there's the economies of scale, I think, that's also like completely unrealistic as well, because the end buyers will tell you, well, we're paying this for that. And you're like, yes, but they're making 10,000 of that. I'm making 200.
That's right.
Nobody cares.
Right.
The end, nobody cares.
Well, it's funny because that's one of the huge struggles of the independent designer, because it makes it that much harder for them to quote unquote design into a price point, because okay, if you want to hit that price, then I need to know that my leathers are going to be more expensive than any hardware, and then if I want to have really nice hardware, then I know my leathers and skins need to be less expensive. And it's super tricky because any of these independent designers, it's almost impossible for them to become a celebrity designer now because they lack economies of scale. It's virtually impossible for them to hit that price to try and get that kind of momentum going. So what are your thoughts on, new designers coming up? I mean, if you were going to do this again, would you be a handbag designer?
I'd probably
or would you want a day job?
I'd probably still be a handbag designer, but I have a day job.
You do. That's true.
I think we all have to have some alternatives. And, of course, my love is painting, and that's what I do, and all that. But the differences that you see today is that, for me, I've been longer than they are. Although I know Rafé for a long time, The thing is that dealing with the department stores today, that's, you go into the main floor, they're all rented. That whole thing is rented. So, where did you sell them? You can't. So it's a very tough, very difficult to go in there. They are on a real estate business. They are no longer in the fashion business.
That's the one thing I always tell designers, and they are always shocked. And I said, you have to look at a department store like a superintendent who wants their renters in. They want them to pay on time, and if that person doesn't pay on time, the product's out. That's it, or they're going to charge you for their money lost. That's exactly it. It's cost per square foot, that this handbag has to cover this square feet, or they're going to cram more stuff in, or that's going to go on markdown quick.
So thank God for the new world that's out there. The internet, it's direct sales, it's your Twitter, it's all that's happening. It's also, I never, ever forgot my mom and papa stores. Never. They are my rock. They've been with me for 30 years, 40 years. They'll buy 10 bags, yes, they buy 20, but guess what? You take 100 of those that buy $20,000 a year for you, it's $2 million. So you just cultivate them, take care of them. They come in, can you shorten this strap? Yes, of course. Can you do this? Of course. Because those are the real ladies that are there. They remember you. I have this bag for 30 years. So it's very, very important. The mom and pop store is back stronger than ever because the ladies out there,
very much so.
They're so loyal.
Yeah.
They're there for you. And the fact of the matter is, that lady cannot shop on department stores anymore. One, she can't find her size, period. Two, she can find service. So she goes into the mom and papa stores.
I had a store that's been buying me for for as long as I've been in business. I mean, when I had a little lapse where I stopped doing it and then I signed on with Jones, as soon as the collection was out, just right back in there. It was incredible.
Right. Yeah, it's love.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because with the independent designers, they had this allure to, I need to get into Barney's, and I need to get into Bergdorf's, and I almost got into Saks, and it takes all my strength not to go up and smack them and be like, no, you don't belong in a department store. That's the very last place you belong. You need at least 5 years worth of good traction of, I always call it Willy Loman in heels, where you go door to door, take your subway, go up and down, go every single store, boutique, do your dog and pony show, get them to buy 2 bags, never do consignment. I don't believe in consignment, that's just me. I feel like if somebody's interested, they'll always buy at least 2. That's a starting point. And then offer them to come in. Can I come in? Can I sell one day? Can I, do something with your influencers? Can I help sell the product so we have a relationship? And then they don't forget. Verve is a store I still go back to just because he was the first store that carried me, and Steve has this foothold in the business that it's just interesting because he can always pinpoint who the next people are. But bringing to my next point, it's really interesting because a lot of these boutiques, the word on the street is that they've stopped buying American independent designers because they've priced themselves, and this goes back to price, over $500, and they've realized that they're so hard pressed to get people buying their stuff that they go on a flash sale site. And the flash sale site then erodes the mom and pop business. And then the mom and pop business say, I don't want to carry your stuff if you're going to be going on a flash sale site. So I'd much rather carry European designers who have no interest in that.
Let me tell you, they're on flash sale sites too. Yeah. Much more actually than because they'll sell it here because they're like, well, nobody knows who I am in the US, so let me sell all my overstock. I mean, you go to My Habit, you see Rick Owens on My Habit. You'll never see him on sale at Barney's until the end of the season. So trust me, they're doing it.
Yeah,
Everybody's doing
it. It's part of the business now. I think you have to be really smart about it. We like to, make sure it's way after the fact, or the product is not the same product, or maybe it's something that we put in production that we didn't have a lot of orders on. So we plan ahead that way. We'll still do production on certain things and make sure that people don't get hurt. But to not do it at all, I don't know.
So what's your take on looking after your influencers? All of you know your customers well enough to know your ladies. That you have, you know the ladies in your local communities in certain cities that they come back, if you're coming to the store, that they'll be the first ones to come to see you. They know you by name. They know, your kids. They know your sisters. How do you look after these kinds of women to keep them coming back? Do you give them special things? Like what do you do for these kinds of mom and pop shops or these influencers to make sure they're still kind of like your local brand ambassador?
Trunk shows, usually, go and do it in sort of remote area. But it's great because when you meet that customer base, you really get a sense of who the woman is out there. It's very different than your New York woman. And I don't know, I think it's important to keep them happy that way.
Yeah, I think trunk shows are great. I mean, I love doing trunk shows because like when you meet that customer, first of all, she's happy to tell you what her needs are. Mm-hmm. I mean, she has absolutely no shortage of like, I want this, I want to do this, I do this, I do that, I do this. It's like a whole slew. It's like, I want to make, it's like, you want this bag to do everything but the kitchen. Like, everything but do the laundry. It's incredible.
Trunk shows are very important. It's, it really is the key to the business, even for the big stores. When I, doing a trunk show at Bergdorf, I mean, it makes a big difference because that customer, she does come by, she comes in, and everything that the store does not buy, I bring it in. It's almost to go and say, okay, here, see, I can sell this. Yeah.
So you bring your own product.
Of course, we bring the trunk, and in the trunk there's everything that it's not what they want. And also they say, oh, we don't buy a collar. Okay, so we'll bring that collar, and that's the first one to go. So it's important to have that, and hear from the ladies that come in and say, I like my strap, I don't like this, I like that. Or I love trunk shows. I'm constantly doing it, and we go and do luncheons and fundraisers in Florida and everywhere you go, Texas. That's how you do your business. Because if you depend what they first buy from you, they now cannot reorder anymore.
Right.
It's the new rule. Oh, we can't reorder anymore. So they buy it, but that's it. Right. Buy for the season, and that's it. How can you grow your business? You can't. So you have to create these commotions. You have to create these situations where then you go in, because the initial buy is the initial buy.
Yep.
And that's it. If they sold out that day, you're out of that for that whole season.
And they'll say, sorry, we've already purchased it. We're not going to bring it on.
That's it. They bought it for the season, and they bought those 5 bags, and they sold the 5 bags, and that's it. So, and if you don't go in there and promote and go back in and say, okay, I'm going to be part of that event or that other event or that other one, I find many times what they bought in the beginning and then what they bought in the end of the season, when you look at the numbers, they go, oh really? We sold that much? Mm-hmm. They don't realize how much business we drummed and made within that period.
I always say that designers have to remember that they're like rock stars, that the majority of rock stars make their money when they go on tour. Uh-huh. They don't make their money from record sales or any other kind of sales. Right. That they make their money only by going store. You go store to store. You do your show. You get people excited, and that's how people want to keep coming back to buy your product. Out of sight, out of mind, because someone can always buy something else.
Right. True.
And many times we see the buyer goes out and she pigeonhole you into one way. And then right before they come see you, they will say to their assistant, don't like orange, don't do the orange, because we're not going to do orange, or because they bought from somebody else. And then you have this incredible orange, and then, or the black and white, whatever they call it at the time. Because sometimes they bought already, so they don't buy it from you. So you need to just chill, and then you go your trunk show, guess what? You bring your fabulous orange, and it goes,
So how much research do you really do on your target customer? how much have you sat down? Have you done an analysis? Because what a lot of designers don't realize that certain colors, certain silhouettes, certain styles do better in certain cities and certain demographics. You know, like Florida would be more open to color. LA would be more open to bigger bags because women aren't driving. New York, they have to be lightweight because women are on the go. How do you cater your line to the demographics of your customer?
Not much more than that in my case. We don't do like coach focus groups and stuff like that, no. You know, it's enough, it's close to me enough. You know, I feel myself as the customer, especially now I am the median age group of our customer after 10 years. So, you know, I think it's common sense. You know that, you know, your warm belt there, people want maybe more color. They're not so into that really super fall look or maybe lightweight. But that for us, that's the extent of sort of common sense and knowing enough of who our brand is to the woman that we know we have.
You have the muscle of Jones now, so do you do a lot more research because of it?
No. I mean, I think so much. I mean, listen, I think research is always good. I think any sort of like information you can glean from the real customer is fantastic. I mean, I happen to sell an international business as well, so certain things I already just know that like I won't do suede because like, you know, Dubai will never buy suede from me, Asia will never buy suede from me. So
why?
Because it just gets moist and dusty and, you know, all of that
stuff. So many people are obsessed with doing bags with suede, and I always say it's a skin, it's disgusting. Your hand grease gets on it. You can't do it.
It'll crock on you,
yeah.
etc.
It basically doesn't sell either.
Yeah,
no.
Exactly, right. So
Europeans understand suede.
Yeah. But in any case, so for me, like, there's only so much you can do. I mean, I think my research is like when we speak to the buyers and they tell us what's working, what's not working. Again, having been in business, I think for a few years now, you kind of just like know your customer. I mean, when you meet the buyers or when you walk out in the streets, I mean, I've met my customers in Moscow and I'm like, okay, she's exactly who I thought she was. You know, and in the end, sometimes you're just
What does your customer in Moscow look like?
She's fabulous. She wears fur. And she's sexy. No, but it was kind of just amazing to like meet this woman who was like, oh wow, you're buying my bag, you have no idea who I am. And like, you love this bag. And I was just trying to communicate with her in the snow and she was looking at me like, get away, who are you?
There is two mysteries on the business, which are, it's ostrich and suede. The Europeans buy ostrich and buy suede. American women will not buy ostrich and suede. It's a mystery that we can never understand. And it's very, very funny. Gucci had the most beautiful suede bags. I mean, really, for years. But never in America, and then they never make it. But it's a very, in ostrich, and we try every year, every season, buy the ostrich, beautiful ostrich bag. It sits in the storage, doesn't sell it. It's a mystery. It's a real mystery.
So let's take this back to manufacturing. So there's a huge push, as I'm sure everybody's aware of, made in New York, made in the Garment Center, made in America. And we found that it's important in terms of press and promotion, but in terms of sales, it's a lot smaller. So how do you do that? Do you do your full amount of production overseas and then do your reorders domestically? Do you not do any?
I don't do any production here at all. I used to back in the day.
Where do you make your samples? All overseas?
All overseas.
Yeah, with the same factory that does the production. It's part of the development.
Yeah.
You know, going back, I started here in New York, and
Yeah,
you know,
me
I
too.
basically found my factory through the Yellow Pages,
Right.
and
Right.
they were amazing. They had been in business 30 years. You know, I was able to go there and work on bags with them and spend time with them.
Right.
It was almost like being my own apprentice with them. And you know, actually, one of them just passed recently, and he was a real mentor, an amazing guy. And you know, he went from New York to New Jersey, and a couple of the other guys that I worked with here are still here. But it's impossible to develop. You can't do anything. I would have to buy all the components separately and hope that they got to the factory at the same time.
I used to buy interfacing, the thread,
Yep.
everything. I mean, literally all they did was cut and sew. It was oh my God, I had like
A nightmare.
boxes and boxes of hardware.
I know, I
remember
donated
that.
to like Parsons
Right?
and FI. Finally, I had to let those Riri zippers
Yes.
go. I had
Yes.
to, Riri
The
fancy.
Riri.
Exactly, yes. FIT high.
Wait.
Here are all our fabrics and swatches.
When I met the people from Riri as a new designer, they're like, do you know where the Ferrari of zipper? I'm like, does that mean I should use you? It's like I was everybody's favorite customer. Like, okay.
Here's my credit.
Okay, I mean, the one thing that was great is that I didn't make my own lining. I didn't get suckered into doing all that unique, bespoke stuff, which more people are doing now because it's so much easier to do. And to do that 10 years ago was really, really hard to find someone who could do bespoke stuff. But gosh, the God bless the suckers. But like you see them, and I work with this woman in South Carolina, and she's like, I made this bespoke lining and I have yards and yards of it, and I got my leather from Italy and my bags. And the funny thing is, I said, well, who's your competition? She's like, Carlos Falchi. And I said, okay. I said, so who's buying you? She's like, well, I keep going and it's costing me so much money because I keep making these road trips to New York. And I said, do you know how many local boutiques are from here to there? And I said, how much are your bags? She said, $2,000. I said, all right, you have so much product left, sell it off. You need the money. Make whatever you can for what you've got, sell it off. Because as a new designer, you invested everything. Like, and then you try to get your own hardware, and then you do the molds, and you're like, what have I done? What have I done? I don't want D-rings. I'm not using D-rings. I've got 10,000 D-rings because I was told I'd get a good deal on D-rings. What do you do? So,
well, I'm the dinosaur. I still manufacture in America. My bags are made here. I won't give it up. It's I've been doing it for so long. It's addictive. You can't give it up, and it's hard. And because of that, has cost me being business, be out of business, being business, be out of business, being business, be out of business, being business. It's been like that because it's hard.
but
It's
doesn't
really
that
hard.
stress you out? Don't
Oh.
you feel like you're gonna choke?
I already had heart attacks. I'm only 30 years old. Look at the hair. Look at the hair. It does stress you out. But I have people to feed. I have people to take care of. And they've been working with me now. Some of their kids work for me. So it's a hard thing to do. I try go in the Orient way and try to go. And it's a different product for me. Now, the couture is all done here. Of course, I have secondary lines, which then, like the HSN, which is then done abroad, is a whole different mindset. I did work in China many, many years because I made shoes I worked for Famous Footwear for years, doing thousands and thousands and thousands of pair of shoes. So you need that kind of factory. You need that kind of handle. You need that kind of. So it is a balance that you have to have. But my main course, my main line, I still have to sit on the machine. I still cut my patterns. I still make because I make it myself. It's different. I do this, sit there, and I gotta do all that.
Did you ever make clothes for your kids?
Of course. And it's that kind of, but I'm a few years ahead of these people, so there's a little different time. I'd love to have it the other way around, where we can just have the CAD doing and all that kind of stuff. I do love to have that too, because there is a balance. You need to have both. One funds the other. It's very hard to fund a couture business. Very, very hard. It's not easy. You need to have, that other second part to stay in business.
Yeah.
Well,
how often do you travel to China? Do you travel? You don't. You do. What's your story, Rafé? Talk to us.
I probably travel, I would say, half the year. I'm away a lot. I just got back last week, and I'm probably going sometime in June again. So I think I go to China like 4 times a year.
Can you speak
3, 4
Chinese?
times. No, not at all. Not at all. Absolutely not. Just enough to say that I don't speak Chinese. So I travel constantly, and I go to Europe as well to do the trade shows. to look at the leather shows, everything. So I'm away a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you don't travel?
Not so much. I have 3 kids, and as my 2 little ones are 3 and 4, and so I traveled a lot when my older one was first born. I had my first kid after I think I was in business a year.
Right.
So, but I was cool to travel then, and I did go to Italy, I did go to Asia. And then once I had the second, I just felt like I couldn't be away that much. And
then that third one came.
Yeah, and then the surprise, third one came. And that really kind of sidelines me in terms of travel. But now I'm getting back into the swing a bit more. But also I've actually had some great members of my team that are great to travel, and they can do it for me. And now, you can Skype and do whatever. But also our factory partners overseas really kind of have it down. So I feel like the development process is quite easy in that sense. They get the language, the hand. It doesn't have to be. And everybody travels. So Italian tanneries come here, we go there.
Right.
All the factories that we work with, there's 2 or 3. Those guys visit us all the time.
Right.
So they come in, that we do show them sketches, and we show them what we're wanting to develop for the following season. So there's a lot of communication. But I think traveling is important, and I have to up that a little bit more for myself.
Do you travel to Europe for inspiration? I find the people that are traveling the most right now are bloggers, because apparently they're going to Europe for inspiration for something. So where do you go when you go to Europe? What do you have your route that you go, okay, I'm going to start this country, and then we're going to go here?
It's always the same, at least for us.
We are in the train all the time.
Right. We would always be. It's always Bologna for leather, and then Paris for fabric. So I go to Paris twice a year. I go to Bologna twice a year, and within those trips, I usually take an extra trip to go somewhere else to see something different. So, recently I was just in Stockholm. That was great. And then sometimes when I'm in Italy, I'll go somewhere else. I'll go to Barcelona, just to see something different. Because I find that sometimes at these shows, the leather shows or the fabric shows, it's great to see the raw materials, but sometimes you just want to see something different. I always find that inspiration isn't even at the shows themselves, but outside, in the streets.
What about you, Carlos?
Well, I have a routine. Basically, I love to drive. So I drive everywhere in Europe, which is a daunting task. But that's what I do. I arrive, I get a car, and I drive. And I love when in Italy, you're just driving.
How many languages do you speak?
6.
Okay.
So
you're fine.
Yeah, I can get along. The idea is basically you're driving and you see a little sign, you go in. These tiny little towns have wonderful, great places, and it's really terrific. Spain is the same way. So not necessarily the main towns, but places that you end up in. It's very inspiring. And then I'm always looking, paintings. Good food, good wine, and of course, and have friends, but don't have that much time, so it has to be really scheduled. And on the Far East, basically my time is Japan. It's where we can have to go. So, but here in America, I love my vacations. It's America. I go on vacations here. It's what I love. I'm a president thing. I have a whole thing about Civil War, so I'm constantly.
Random.
It's right here, my vacation here, and of course.
Your family must have been ecstatic.
The girls have the school. They have to go here, have to go there, have to go there. We went every capital, everywhere. So it's in Brazil, of course, my country. So.
I heard a story, and I'm assuming it's true, that the Fashion Week in Brazil is different than the way they handle it here. That they
and everything in Brazil is different than in Italy. Let's start right there.
But that what they show on the catwalk is actually what's going to be in stores. Is that true?
It's so big, Fashion Week in Brazil. It's so crazy. I'm not part of it, so I don't know exactly, but it's amazing. São Paulo is 20 to 25 million people now. It's crazy. So
It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the economy is incredible. So, but the beauty of Brazil is that it's from the north. People don't realize that it takes 10 hours to cross Brazil by plane.
Wow.
You know, it's that big.
I'm already tired.
That's right.
So, sorry.
Yeah.
So when you're starting your line, how many bags do you start in your collection? Do you have a routine saying, okay, I'm going to go from silhouette to silhouette to silhouette, or what is the typical process for starting a new collection? Do you say, okay, I know I need to start with my 3-core silhouettes, or Slouchy's coming back, so I need to start with another one. So let's just start with you, Rafé, just because you're here.
Well, recently we've been starting with a merch plan, so that you kind of
What's a merch plan?
Merch plan is like having your good, better, best sort of like categories, so that you have your good, which is anywhere from $95 to $200, and then you have your better from $200 to $400, and then your best from $400 up and whatever. And so within those buckets, we kind of say, okay, so in the better category, we want like 20 SKUs or 30 SKUs. In your best, like 15 or 20 or whatever, all the different numbers that sort of make up to how many bags we actually might sell at the end of the, at the end of the season, and what we want to show in the collection. So this way, it isn't a free-for-all of just developing like infinitum, which is something I like to do. But
How do you sketch now? Do you still do it? Do you still do it pencil, paper, the whole thing?
Yeah, totally. I'm old school.
Narciso Rodriguez used to be at my gym. I used to see him at the gym, and he would be on the treadmill sketching, which was always.
I can't do that.
No.
Those sketches would be so crazy.
I was used to try and go on the treadmill right next to him, just be like, "Are you really doing that? So do you find more?" And I'd say, "Do you get more inspiration going uphill?" And he'd look at me like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "I don't. How do you do that anyway?"
Yeah.
So what's your story?
It's funny because we actually started today for spring. So part of it is very organized. We do a merch plan as well, so it's kind of like a blueprint to what you're going to sell by style. In our case, I think it's the size of the bag kind of dictates the price. So we do it, we need this many crossbodies, or based on what we've sold in the past, what have been the highlights. But that part is kind of simultaneous to just sort of looking at the deliveries and then thinking about what the inspiration for each delivery will be.
Do you do a storyboard?
Yeah, we do kind of like a big wall, and then we divide it into 3 deliveries, and we put all of our inspiration pictures up top and kind of try to tell a cohesive story, but then also have a board that reminds us of what our brand DNA always has to kind of...
Do you change those pictures, rotate those pictures?
We add to them, we take things away sometimes, but it's like a core. It's almost like it's just
Are all your
mantra.
fashion magazines ripped out and cut up?
I like to just scan through them, take out what I like, and then recycle the rest. I hate clutter. I'm very much about like getting rid of things I don't need. So those kind of mental, creative markers are always there. And then you start the sketching. It's just little things at first, and then we sort of build. And then it gets more technical where you'll bring back repeat styles. But that's not how we start the season. We really think of new first and know that, okay, but we have to bring X, Y, and Z back. So that's kind of filler, but we know we need a certain amount of styles. But I also tend to overdevelop, and after the fact, I'm like, oh, I can't believe we spent that much on development for this season.
You say that every season.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I think it's chronic for every designer. It's over, like, my team calls it Rafé math. It's like 1 + 1 is not 2. 1 + 1 is 5. By the time I'm done.
Yeah.
Remember, they're all your children. Who do you pick?
Right.
And none of them are my favorites.
I have
all
favorites.
good. They're all good. Well, yeah, I have a favorite for the season, and
Yeah, well, I think
Yeah.
for me it starts with materials, because that's what I developed it from. It's really, I'm developing the materials itself and grow that. And obviously, it's, yes, I need somebody go, come on, enough, we have a lot of here. So all that happens.
How do you sketch? Do you have a sketchbook? What do you do?
I do my my little doodles and stuff like that. And Katie now and Christine, they all sit there and say, oh my God, let's make this into a something cohesive in here.
Do you sketch at home?
Yes. And
Do
now
you drive your wife crazy with everything everywhere?
I have paint everywhere. So,
Wow.
and it's
You
but
could not be
that's-
married to Monica. She'd clean
No.
up.
No.
I
Drive
get
her
rid of
crazy.
everything.
So it starts with me in there, the materials, and then I go in and we categorize everything and put it in there, and then say, okay, what is our success stories? What was the disaster? Why this didn't do it? Reasons for no reason, and that's how we get into a collection. Now I really have to apologize, but I really have to go. I have another. I apologize, but I have to run.
Well, let's give Carlos a round of
Yeah,
applause.
well, it's great hanging out with you.
Sorry.
Just one comment.
Yes, please.
I've enjoyed having you, and thank you very much. Learned from you, and obviously you're successful. One thing I do want to comment on is I appreciate and applaud you for having a large part of your business made in the USA. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And by the way, we are right in this building. So if you all are to come up on the 12th floor, and you see our design studio and everything else.
He's very warm and welcoming. He'll have you.
So Derek, please come, spend time or whatever. So
Okay.
that's it. Thank you
Thank
again.
Yay.
So now it's just the dynamic duo. So this is
More
this.
pressure on us.
I think
Yeah, no pressure. So at this point, I'm just curious. How do you reach new stores? How does that work? Do you still do trade shows? You don't. You do.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
lifeblood of our business. I mean, if we didn't do trade shows,
Are you at every trade show?
I don't personally go to every trade show. I go in usually in the first day.
Yeah.
But then usually sales, will push me out because I inadvertently will talk about the next season instead of selling what's
Yeah.
in there. It's always the next season I want to talk about. So I'm really not good at taking orders either. I'm like, oh my God, what was that? They asked me the price. I'm like, yeah, I'm bad. So I can design it, but I can't sell it. And yeah, but the trade
Was
shows
that
are key.
difficult for you when you started?
Well, listen, at the beginning, you have to do everything until you realize someone else is better at it.
Right. Exactly.
So then you're like, okay, well, good, perfect. So somebody else can do the selling, and I can do what I'm really good at. But trade shows, without trade shows, I mean, how does anybody find anybody?
Yeah.
I mean, once in a while, we'll get somebody emailing us out of the blue.
Yeah.
But that's few and far between.
Yeah, you have to do road trips. You have to do a little research too. We have some in the sales department now. We actually did not do our own sales I'm in business 10 years. For 7 years, I had outsourced sales. I was with Stephen Allen Showroom for a year, and then I was with Cynthia O'Connor. That was a huge learning curve. Sales is not something, I feel like the artistic personality and the sales personality are two very different things. And in the beginning, I did do my own sales. I was really shocked that I even could do that. I'd walk into a store with my bag and they'd like it, and I said, hey, And so, but quickly after that, I realized it's actually quite technical, and you do have to understand how not only to sell in, but to monitor the business, understand what's working. Your sales team has to communicate all the time, because there might be real bright spots that you can do reorders, but there might be duds that you have to pull out, and it's a whole system.
It's a whole game.
It really
Yeah.
is.
And I'm not good at that game. I mean, thank God I have somebody who's incredible at it, who's here, but without her, I'd be like, I wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah,
I don't know where to begin.
Well, let's go back to the beginning
It's very
because
complicated.
Very.
no, it's
really.
challenging because either it's it's the whole right left brain challenge. Are you a designer or are you a business person? And
You
there's
have
so
to be both. There's no such thing
Yeah.
as one or the other.
well.
Definitely.
How did you get started with your first bag, and when did you get your first official employee? When did all that happen?
That was a long time ago. When did I get
Let's
that?
dig back.
That was, wow, that was 1998. I sold everything from the beginning on my own. I'd walk into stores. I remember
Did you
walking,
carry pulling a suitcase?
Absolutely.
Every single.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember walking into Fred Siegel's and saying, I'm here to see the buyer. And they're like, you have an appointment? I'm like, no, but I came all the way from New York. She better see me. I was relentless.
That's great.
Ignorance is bliss.
I found Fred Siegel.
have
The
to be.
buyers are never there.
She happened to be there.
You got lucky.
I got lucky. I unzipped my bag and showed her everything. And she asked one of the managers what he thought and he loved it. And then I got an order. I walked out with an order. I was like, oh my God, wow, how did this happen? Sustaining that is difficult, but like that initial sort of like, you know, fall in love thing was great.
I don't drive, so when I went to LA, I had to have someone drive me, and they just sat out there for 5 hours.
My cousins had to take the day off. I don't drive either, so
Yeah.
I would schedule all my friends. Okay, Monday you're taking the day off. Tuesday you're taking the day off. I'll take you to dinner, but you're driving me.
I met some girl who was a friend of a friend of a friend and stayed with her and discovered all sorts of fascinating things about people in Los Angeles and what they do with their spare time. And I was like, I just need you to drive. So just, if you could just stay sober for at least half the day, and then you can do what you have to do after that. That was that. And I said, I'll find someone to take the afternoon slot if this is too much.
Yeah, but that was the beginning. I mean, you kind of, I did, you know, walk into stores. That's how I got my first order in New York. I walked into, you know, a store. And
What was your first store in New York?
Big Drop in Soho. Yeah, walked into the store and I was like, I think you need these. Like, really? My buyer was like, really? Yeah, I think you need these.
Do you think you're that ballsy now?
No. At that time, I was like, what have I got to lose? Nobody knows the hell I am. Like some kid with some stuff, you know, walking into a store. Now I would not have the gumption to just walk up and be like, hi, blah, blah, blah. Just can't, I don't know.
No, I feel exactly the same way.
I don't have the
What's interesting,
audacity.
It's crazy because I really worked at being a photographer, and I was so sensitive about my portfolio that it was like never really ready to show these editors or those editors, but I was on set a lot, and so I got some attention from the bags I had. But when I was first really making them, I just called the editors and sent them email of the picture of the bag.
Right.
And the same editors, because
It's so incestuous.
so related, they were like, oh, come in.
So
And I
did
was
you
like
get
making
press before
deals
you
in
got
the
real
Condé Nast
Did you get
building.
more press before you got sales?
My first piece of press was at Lucky magazine. It was a well
that's
page, an
lucky.
editorial.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
cell phone was in it.
Yeah.
I didn't have an office or anything, and I got calls from everywhere. And it was
Yeah.
nuts. It was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't know, it was a different time. I had a friend who, my first account here, I found, there was one store in Long Island called Trees, which is still an account today. And right after that, Barney's was my second account. And the way that that happened was, interestingly, a really good friend of mine had a buyer best friend or something that was just leaving, like on maternity, like permanent maternity leave. So she said, well, tell your friends to put a package together, and if I like it, I'll give her the contact information. So she liked it. She gave me Julie Gilhart's number.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like emailing Julie Gilhart, like, hi, and then calling the assistant, like, did you get my email? And they were like, oh, we love it, come in. But I had no idea, had I known. It was like, basically, as a photographer, maybe if it was like calling some kind of
Like
big-time
Stephen
stylist,
Meisel
or
or
yeah, or exactly, or Anna Winter herself. But I didn't know. But now, yeah, same thing. I would be like,
Same thing for me. Like walked into W magazine at that time. Of course, the
You walked in?
security wasn't tight at all. I was like, I'm here to I want to meet Anne Slowey, and they're like, do you have an appointment? I'm like, no. They call Anne. They're like, hey, someone's out here to meet you. Oh, she's not answering. Then she's walking through with her lunch. Oh, this kid wants to meet you. I was like, hi.
Let me show you some handbags while
Yeah,
you eat your
Yeah,
salad.
it was great. And she
you
was
could
like,
do things like that.
Yeah, I don't think you can do it anymore.
I don't think you
You
can.
can't get through security.
No.
No, because you have to go
These days.
past the bloggers.
Absolutely.
They're there first. That's why.
Yeah. It's a different time.
Yeah.
So I just want to touch on this before we get to the Q&A. But at what point did you realize you were ready to take on employees? Were your sales big enough? Were you overwhelmed? Were you drowning? Were you saying, oh my God, I need help? When did that happen?
All at the same, yeah, all of that. All of that. At some
Yeah,
point, you
quickly.
realize you just can't do it on your own.
Yeah, I remember I started really in my apartment. I lived on Sullivan Street. It was a 6th-floor walk-up. And when I had bags made and whatnot, I was literally selling them, though, not only just to stores. I met girls on my street in the hallway. Like, I was taking cash for bags all day long. And then at some point, I took, like a few months later, I had the opportunity to take a live-work loft space on Crosby Street, which was like 3 times the rent I was paying, but still very low, considering especially where we are today. And I was like, I don't know, should I do it, should I not? And then I got an intern, and I think within a year, I actually started paying her. And then from there,
Is she
a
still
couple
with you?
more.
No.
Yeah.
No. She lasted like a couple years, but she didn't have the right attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it was, yeah, the same thing for me. I mean, I started working out of our apartment, and you know, at one point, of course, it's a residential building, so you can't really like do any shipments there.
Nope.
Right.
So every time we had to do like a huge shipment, well, you know, the doorman would be like, "It's a lot of stuff you're moving in and out of your apartment." I'm like, "I know, I'm sure, like." $50, you know, just to be in the hush hush. And finally, I was just like, okay, can't do this anymore. This is
No.
ridiculous. Like there's like 100 bags coming through like my apartment. Not happening.
I had my Dominican security guy. I used to bring him food. I used to like literally go across the street.
Yeah.
I was like, "What do you want to eat today?"
Yeah,
I'm
I was
like, "I'll
beholden
hook you
to my
up."
doorman.
Yeah.
So yeah, that had to end.
So one last thing, let's just hit on this just because it's such a big thing right now, social media. So I know, and I'm fascinated by this, that your big famous foothold is Polyvore. That you're well, we have someone here who's we have a Poly fan, but you know,
I didn't realize that.
you're a bit of a rock star. So how are you managing this, and how involved are you? Are you handling the tweets? How involved are you on the social media level personally?
Very involved, actually. I would have to say I do 80% of it on my own, because everything now is a mobile app, so it's so easy. I mean, like what, Instagram,
Yeah, we
Vine, Pinterest, you can do everything on your phone. So there's, you know, I mean, there's a lot of downtime between, you know, when you're in a taxi going to work, you're like, tweet, done, you know,
Yeah.
or like if you're waiting for the plane, you're like, okay, it's gonna be an hour from now, let me just post something on Instagram. It's like everything's a touch, like away from being posted. So I think that's made it so easy. And I have to tell you what's incredible is the direct communication you have. I mean, I have people who will on Instagram say, where can I buy that bag? And I'm like, Neiman's, Anthro, you know? And I tag everybody because like you never know.
Yep.
You know, when we're in Paris for Fashion Week, we're like, I'm tagging the bloggers to come and visit me at my booth. They're like, come see me at my booth. And they're like, oh, so, because everybody looks at their Instagram probably like what? Like as much as they blink. Everybody's like checking. So before you know it, like, you know, I'll have somebody come over because just like, oh, you tagged me, so yeah, I'm interested to see what you have. You never
Where's
know.
this guy who tagged me? What
Yeah,
book is
absolutely. Yeah, it begins somewhere, and it's a great way to have that open dialogue, for me at least.
No, I totally agree. I think at first I thought it was a burden because initially, you know, it didn't exist. And I find that it's a whole nother department in your office structure. So, and interestingly enough, you know, it's something that I didn't know anything about. So the young people are really teaching me.
Right.
And that is also kind of new because I've seen myself get to be like now kind of in the...
How do I do this?
Yeah.
Where do I put this?
But I picked it up fairly quickly. What I think is difficult is to manage is the spectrum.
Right.
You have Facebook. So my thing is more Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And by the way, I wasn't even on Facebook personally until I started doing it for Botkier because I didn't feel like I needed a personal page.
Right.
Then you need a personal page to actually manage a business page. So, but you know, with Vine and Tumblr and I don't know what else is there. A bunch of other Polyvore. There's a lot of content you have to generate, and I think. Yeah, videos. I mean, like you can have a whole separate production company. Basically, you have to run a magazine, a branded magazine.
Right.
So sometimes that gets overwhelming, especially when you see the big brands and how beautifully they're able to do it. You feel like, you know, how can you compete with that? You know, not only budget-wise, but just like mental capacity-wise.
And time capacity.
And sometimes it's so random what people like. I mean, like on my YouTube, like people really love like this video I shot of like these waiters dancing on New Year's Eve in Varanasi. They were like, I'm doing the Bollywood dance. I'm like, that's the most hits. Who knows why? Nothing to do with my bags, but people love it. You know, so.
You got to go back to them.
Exactly.
For a part
Maybe
two.
have them dance with the bags.
Oh,
Right.
there you go.
But anyway,
placement.
it's interesting. The whole social media thing has, I think, taken a whole new dimension to what designers do, and being to be more accessible to the public. Yeah.
It's
I
real
always
access.
tell new designers that if you're starting out, you need to Instagram your whole process. Once the bag is done, you need to pin your bag, and then you need to tweet
Pinterest.
that you're making your bag, and then you have to make sure that you're uploading the pictures on Facebook. Wow, look at my bag. This is now where it's selling. And then make sure you have a full Tumblr page of this was last summer, this was the collection, this is the new collection, here's my inspiration. And it's exhausting, but it's the fastest way to develop a foothold in the market, at least to prove that you exist, because we call them fans with brands with fans.
Right.
And that's how people try to see if you've got sellability now.
Well, even with Polyvore, I mean, I started it really just like a few months
Do you manage it?
I do it, yeah. I do it myself. And it was kind of just one of those like, let me try this, it's fun. And then I started seeing people use my bag, so I would comment on their pages, and before I knew it, it just turned into like, oh my God. It's like, you know, it's
You're a poly celebrity.
well, it's, you know, it's fun. I like paper dolls.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so very much. I'd like to open up the floor to questions. We have time for a few of them, so take advantage of this time. Go ahead.
I'd like to ask advice on trade shows, like which ones you would recommend for people starting out.
So what trade shows would you recommend for people starting out?
I think some of the smaller ones, maybe, like Designers and Agents. There's a bunch of them, in fact.
I say Capsule
Oh,
as
Capsule.
well.
I can't think of other. There's the Core show.
I always say that if you can walk a trade show, because if you have a business card, you can walk a trade show. And they're all within your reach. E&K makes it very accessible because they're always looking for people to try and get into the shows, considering there's so much competition.
Yeah.
That all you have to do is show a business card, walk the show, and it's amazing because you find the most amount of inspiration to see, okay, this person's line is similar to the line I'm working on. I see how they're merchandised. I see that their booth is empty. I see that their booth is crowded. I see the candy they have. Every little piece tells a story.
This way you can see your adjacencies as well, who you want to compete with, or who you think you are, then when you see it at the show, or you don't see it at the show. Sometimes it's always, you know, it's a good thing to do. I mean, even when I do the shows, I'll walk sometimes really quickly just to see like, well, what people are showing, if I'm in line with what's happening, or just to kind of just get a sense of the traffic.
Anybody else? Yes?
What do you think about digital replacing the physicality of a trade show?
What do you think about digital replacing the physicality of a trade show?
I think buyers, for the most part, I mean, I think shoppers, for the most part, I think online is great. I think a lot of editors actually love seeing the lookbooks online instead of actually going to the appointment sometimes. But I think for buyers, for traditional buyers, they really they want to be able to touch and hold and like,
See, feel, touch.
and yeah, because there's certain things, there's certain leathers that on a photograph it could look like this like stiff bag because it's overstuffed. But actually when you come closer and you touch it, you're like, oh my God, it's like super soft.
It's like butter.
Yeah, so I think it'll help for certain buyers who can't make it to the trade show, but I think nothing will ever replace that, you know, that touch and feel of actual product.
Yeah, and there's some programs now. There's some tech companies that have started where you can upload, like Jor is one, and you can upload.
Do you work with any of them?
We do work with Jor, but it's one of those things that we can't seem to really rely on consistently. It sounds like a great idea. You know, they have a database. We can kind of connect with those stores. Our whole inventory and our line sheets would be available. But it's not that simple for the buyer. They really want to see the bag. They want to come in. It's a whole process, you know, for the stores. So
and they want to make their selection, and they want to be able to put it on the floor or on a shelf and kind of see, okay, this is what I'm buying. You can't do that online. I mean, then you're asking them to cut and paste and Photoshop it on the shelf. Like, then it's a whole other level. It's so much easier to just be able to touch, put everything on the floor and be like, okay, that's my buy.
So you think digital more works in tandem with that? Once they've seen the product, then they'd be more apt to go up and then view it online and then because with
like reorder business.
Are all your orders now through Jor? Like, do you have to place your orders that way?
No. For the most part, they're really not. But it's a tool. We still make sure to maintain it properly and keep it up to date. But we're finding that it's not really taking off like that.
And
at least for us.
Yeah, and also, like, you know, when you sell internationally, I mean, we sell to a lot of Japanese stores, and they want to hold it, they want to touch it, they want to see the proportion, they want to measure it.
Do they measure it?
They measure everything as they're buying it, because they want to make sure that
Yeah.
that's what they're going to get. I mean, it's incredible how
Meticulous.
how meticulous the Japanese are when they buy something. They have a number for that item that they're buying. So it's 113, so you know you're the 113th bag they bought for the season. They put it up on like shelf, and then they have like tape measures. So like they measure everything. They write it down. They have their own sheet. They take a Polaroid and put. I mean, it's incredible. So there's no way that they can look at that.
I would never survive.
It's
I would never
incredible.
survive in Japan.
No, it's amazing how organized they are and how meticulous they are and how to do that. So if you showed them a line sheet online, they'd be like, what does that mean?
Right.
They want to see the inside of the bag. They take pictures of the inside. It's incredible.
It's fascinating though, like even when you're talking about linings, how many people, it still blows my mind, do dark linings in big bags. Like a bucket bag, why would you do that? Like things get lost. It's like the handbag abyss.
Right.
It's like one of the key points I always say, when making a big bag and your demographic are money women that are 35 to 54 plus, they all have glasses. They will never find their bag. They'll never find their glasses. Remember that. Think of your mother trying to, where are my goddamn glasses? It's like everyone knows it and seen it. So, it's like those key points. Does anybody have any other questions?
Why do you think we live in this world of the it bag?
I just have to repeat the question, sorry.
What-
Why do you think we live in this world of the it bag?
I would say it seems less of an it bag world to me today than it did a few years ago. So there's that. I think women have a lot more choice now. But I think there's also, you can't underestimate how much marketing you're subjected to. So it bags are created by major magazine coverage and celebrity seating and all of those things that keep reminding you of those same silhouettes over and over again. So it's kind of fabricated, I think, at this point.
I always say sometimes the challenge for a small designer or under the radar designer is that you actually have to get someone to like your bags first, then they realize it's yours, and maybe they'll buy again. While as I think with the bigger brands, they're predisposed to liking it because they're bombarded with it.
Right.
I mean, they're like everywhere you look, you see the same bag over and over again, from the celebrities to the ads to the editorials. So you're like, I don't think you even realize that you're like, oh, I like it, because that's all you see.
Right.
Exactly.
While as I think with smaller designers with less marketing behind them, less PR, you kind of it has to be grassroots.
Right.
So I think that's challenging. But you're right. I mean, right now there's so many it bags. So who's it?
Yeah.
What's it? There's so many to choose from. And I think women are deciding what to them is their it bag. And the choices are, just run the gamut.
Yeah, I mean, you can spend, besides having the opportunity in terms of design, you can also, I mean, the price point of bags runs from $200 to $5,000. I mean,
$9.99. Well, what are your take on diffusion lines? Doing these lower end with bigger department stores. I mean, Target was doing the capsule.
Yeah, we did one with Target
did
in
too.
2007.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
That's the
you did
first
one.
actually to do
Yeah,
it.
you
done.
did do it first.
Yes.
And by the way,
Yeah, and by the way, no, it was great. It was a fun experience, and when they did it, I kept saying no to them for years because I was like, well, who knows me anyway? So why would you put me on Target? But it was incredible because they had an amazing success with it, and I think it was just a realization that America was ready for design. Not so much like ready for me, but they were just ready for design. They just wanted design bags, and just because it was $39.95 or $50, it didn't mean it had to look like that.
right.
So I think the bar has been raised in every price point.
That's
like
very
everybody's buying design.
true. You have access to all of that,
Yeah,
Yeah.
whether it's Zara, H&M.
absolutely.
Well, I heard from a little bird that the Nordstrom trend buyer now wants leather bags at $100 because at the $100 price point because Topshop sells $100 leather bags now.
Yeah,
So
they Topshop's direct.
right.
So that's another thing that people
Yeah.
don't realize. Like J. Crew, Zara, Mango, all those stores, they don't wholesale.
Right.
So it's direct to retail. So
Yeah.
of course they can price it whenever they want. But if they had to wholesale that, trust me, it would not be $85.
Exactly, exactly. But that's where I think the consumer is not educated. You know, they're really not, they don't know. So
It's a hard process to educate that consumer.
yeah, I mean, I don't even know how you would go about.
Be like, by the way.
And you know what? And even if you did, I don't think she cares.
Nope.
At the end of the day, that's her threshold. I want to spend $80, or I want to pay, or I want to pay $800. Whatever her threshold is, that's it. She doesn't care how it got there, why it's that.
Right.
That's what she wants to pay. That's it.
Right.
Either she'll wait for it on sale or buy it full price. Whatever the reason
That's
is.
who she is.
That's it. I mean, we have it all day long at 9 West. You know, like she has a threshold. She'll pay like $75. More than that, tricky.
Right. Whew.
That's, you know.
Anybody else? Yes?
So what's the way to contact the buyers? Because you mentioned that the security, you know, so now time is different than before. So, because speaking of trade show, I think if you have something original that you're afraid that people will not love at a trade show. So I was thinking, is there any way that I could contact the buyers directly that escape the procedure of being public before you actually...
Well, here's the thing. You're
Can
gonna
I, well, so the question was, how do you reach buyers?
Right.
And if you have a unique item without being knocked off. And I think at the end of the day, no one will knock you off unless your product has sold and is successful, because no one's going to want to knock you off if there's no sales behind it. And
Yeah, if you look at what's knocked off on Canal Street, they're the same bags that you probably think, well, of course they're knocking this off because it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think people are going to knock off like something so original that people are like, what the hell is this?
and the fact is, if it's so original, then it might not sell. And that's the other thing.
Yeah, so don't be afraid of being knocked off because it'll happen eventually, or it may never happen. Who knows? But that's that's the reality of our business.
But the fastest way I always say to reach a buyer now is friend them on Twitter and reach out to them, and then try to figure out a way to get their email address. But friend them on Twitter and figure
find
out.
them on LinkedIn.
And oh God, of course, LinkedIn. I am like a premium LinkedIn person. I contact everybody. I've apparently was in the top 1% of searches. I think I paid for it with my premium membership. But yeah, Twitter and LinkedIn, and you want to make sure that you come up with your own social media schedule to hit up these buyers and make sure you're not stalking them, because you'll get blacklisted quick. Much like with editors, you have to figure out a way, hey, I've got this great bag, how can I send it to you, what's the best way? I know there's certain editors here that prefer to have JPEG sent as attachments, others don't, right? But make sure, and this is a huge point, make sure if you're ever doing a JPEG attachment that you make sure that you have your name on the JPEG. So, you know, those get pulled out, and then once again, then you don't exist. Because that buyer will not, or buyer or editor won't dig through their emails. They'll dig for 2 minutes and they'll say, I'll find somebody else, because there's plenty of people to look for. And make sure when you save, make sure there's no $signs, plus signs, hashtags, any of that. The most you can do in a JPEG is an underscore, or else it won't save. Chances are it won't convert. So you always want to make sure your name is there, and the product, and the style, and the dollar amount, if you just have underscore 325 or something like that, to make it as easy as possible. And just as another note, make sure that all of your line sheets and all of your lookbooks and any correspondence you have has a way for you to be found. There's nothing more annoying than going to a designer's site that has a fill-in sheet to be contacted. If I want to contact you, I want to speak to you now. I don't want to wait for you to contact me. That's a window of a loss. That's a loss of opportunity. You want people to find you if there's a remote amount of interest, then you've just missed a sale. If you just neglected to put your email address on a business card, on a line sheet, on a lookbook, you need to be found. That's how I would recommend doing it.
And don't take it personally when they don't answer you, because you're probably one of 20,000 people. We all want the same editors. We all want the same buyers. We all want the same customers. So, like, get in line.
To get in the New York,
It's true.
To get in the New York Times, I had to sell my soul.
Yeah.
I literally did. I had to be in a story about sororities, which is, of course, the first thing I want to talk about. And because the Reese Witherspoon movie had just come out, and she wanted to do a whole piece on sororities, and she said, well, can you help me with that story, and then I'll help run yours. And I said, well, what do you need? She said, I need a variety. I was like, do you want urban? Do you want Hispanic? Do you want African American? What could Greek? I was like, I will get you a representative from every kind of sorority if you think you can make this story, because my bag was just on Sex and the City, and I said, it's got to be in this. It's got to. Like, I'm running out of options to try and get this out there. And it ran, and then it was great. And for some reason, someone from the Times contacted me after and said, would you like this laminated? I'm like, of course I would. So, which was even funnier. And then the piece ran about me in the sororities, and I said to my mom, I said, did you see it? And she's like, So there's some things you want, but there's others you don't. But sometimes you've got to give a little to get what you want. But it's got to be done with tact, or else you will get blacklisted. Bless you.
Thank you.
No, there's one particular editor I know who still won't talk to me because of how I handled something in 2002. How I literally showed up at the door, waited to see her, showed her my bag. I was like, you emailed me back. It was like a bad date. Like, you must like me. You must want to go out with me. I thought we were together, you know? And she said, I really don't have time. I'm like, but don't you want to just take it upstairs? Do you want to try it on? You can use it for the weekend. And yeah, she remembers me that way. So it's, you've got to make sure it's done well. How much time do we have left?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay, we've got time for maybe 2 more questions. 5 minutes? Okay, 2 more questions.
There's one here.
Oh, yes?
So something came up this week that was really disappointing. I sourced leather from Italy that was special and unique to what I'm doing. And I just saw those piece goods in an editorial spread. And now they arrived today. And I'm struggling with, do I use them or do I not use them? Even though I would use it in a different way, but without divulging exactly what it is, there's a treatment on the leather that would make it recognizable. And it's not a knockoff scenario, but obviously both of
It's an
us
inspiration knockoff.
had an eye for it and liked it, and someone beat me to the punch. So do I completely walk away, or do I follow my gut that told me to use it in the first place? What would you do?
That's a tough one.
That's a tough one, because if this, whoever's used it first, if that's everywhere, that everyone's going to see that, unfortunately, you will look like a knockoff. But if it's not out there in a big way, and you know on your own, I mean, listen, we all, at some point, everybody uses the same thing.
Yes,
we all go to the same
tannery.
tanneries. We all look at the same leathers. I mean, it's inevitable. I mean, pebble leather is pebble leather.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that yours is, but at some point, we all look at the same finishes. So it's tough. As long as I know in my heart that I'm going to do with it my way, like,
The execution will be unique because it's yours.
Yeah, like, listen, I love using water snake. Everybody uses water snake. I'll still do it whether someone else is doing the same exact color, because I do it my way. And at some point, if you're gonna make that stop you from doing anything, you can't do anything. Yeah. Especially as a smaller designer, you're subject to the tannery's whims. Like, listen, I used to buy python from the same tannery that Dolce would have it. But guess what? I would get mine so late that it didn't matter that I even ordered it.
Right.
Because you would walk into the tannery, see the whole box that said Prada, Gucci, and you're like, hi, 2 skins. Really? Really? Yeah, so it's, you know, at some point you just have to be realistic to what you think you're going to accomplish by doing that.
At the end of the day, as a designer, if you spent the money on it, you got to use it. It's a loss.
Well, now I'm thinking maybe I do cuffs out of it and not bags, because I mean, anyways, I would be using it differently.
I just think
it as a trim because it was a one piece good and I wanted to save on my dollar. But and maybe I'm using something that they developed, and maybe
It's possible because
maybe they made a plate for it, or a laser, or whatever it was, and
go with your gut.
I'm reaping the benefits. I don't know, but I've been struggling with whether
the other flip side is that sometimes, and it sounds so cliche, but everything happens for a reason. That perhaps this is a sign, and I don't buy into any of that, but perhaps this is a sign for you to go back and reconfigure that product to make it that much more innovative. That even though you saw it somewhere else, your interpretation might be that much more on point with who you are as a designer than it would have been before. So I agree. I would absolutely go with your gut. And at the end of the day, you spent the money on it, and it will be a loss if you don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would be a pillow.
Yeah, a really nice Italian pillow, which I hear are very fashionable these days. So how are we? Okay, one more question. If anybody has, yes?
What are the criteria for you to choose a sales rep and where to find the good ones?
Okay.
Referral?
Okay, what are the criteria to find a good sales
Yeah,
rep?
they are actually. There's not that many, so it makes it much
that.
easier to find. I think that in New York there are a few showrooms that, you know, you have to see what kind of product they have and what kind of product you have and see, you know, if the store matrix is in line with, you know, if you're super edgy, then you don't want to go to a very commercial showroom.
But
also if they'll
showrooms
take you.
are really expensive too.
And also if they'll take
They
you.
do cost you, yeah.
Because they may not even, just because you want to be with them doesn't
No.
mean they want to be
Exactly.
with you.
No, and again,
But that's
I
like
think
that with trade shows too. You know, you can't just sign up for
No.
the trade show. You have to audition for the trade
Oh,
show.
I got
Just
in.
because you can pay for it doesn't mean they
No,
want you. Yeah.
no. I got into E&K right as my bag was going on Sex and the City, and I had I didn't even go into production. I only had samples, and my bags were so little that my booth looked so sad. I had to do a whole disco theme to make up for it, and then they called to use my bag for the episode, so I had to give half my samples. So I had the $7,000 booth
Yeah.
with 7 samples on a wall. Where are the rest of the bags? I'm my mom's dropping them off at Sex and the City studio in Long Island City right now. So here's a picture. It's going to be on.
Yeah.
Don't you want to buy that one?
Yeah.
But just to go back to your point, that at the end of the day, you should not have a sales rep. You should be doing everything yourself for as long as you physically can. You should absolutely not employ anybody. You need to be the jack of all trades. You need to know the editors yourself. You need to know the bloggers yourself, the buyers, everything you need to do yourself in order to know how it should be done and if someone that you hired is not doing what they're supposed to. Otherwise, you're going to get taken advantage of, and much like we've all had this experience with your products being shipped to department stores, and then they say your product's not selling, and then you go to do a trunk show and you find out, guess what? It's still in the boxes in the basement. And now you're being written up as the person who has poor sales, and it turns out, well, of course it's not selling. It's in a box.
Yeah.
You got to know these things firsthand. So this wraps up our Inside the Handbag Designer Studio. Thank you all so much for coming. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.